Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Leslie Lawton, your Vice President of the Historical Society and the Museum Association. I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight. Thank you very, very much for coming. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. As you came up the stairs, you had an opportunity to sign a little card or leave your name in a basket. We're going to have a drawing at the end of the presentation, and it's for a goodie from our gift shop, our beautiful gift shop. So if you haven't already, I'll pass out some little cards at the end and get everybody's name that would like to be eligible for the drawing. The second thing is, also at the top of the stairs is a sheet to give us your email address. If you would like to receive email announcements of what is going on at the museum on an ongoing basis, we promise we will not share your email with anybody. It is just for our purposes of keeping you informed of what's going on here at the museum. And trust me, there's lots going on. And this year is going to be another terrific year for events. So if you'd like to be notified by email on your way out tonight, please sign that list. And now a brief introduction of our speaker, Mark Hylkema, who many of you were here last year at this time, exactly a year ago, to hear his talk on the Ohlone Indians. It was so popular and extremely well done that all year long I have been asked by members, when are you going to have that guy back? So, notified Mark a couple of months ago, and he reminded me, or I remembered, that he had a number of topics on which he could speak. And tonight is going to be a terrific presentation on the findings of a Colombian mammoth elephant found, of all places, on a family farm in Castroville. So it's practically right in our next door neighbor's yard. Mark is an archaeologist with Santa Cruz District of California State Parks, and he's also a teacher of anthropology at Foothill College. Over the past 30+ years, he has directed many excavations throughout the greater San Francisco and Monterey Bay areas, and most recently is the one in Castroville. The exciting thing about this dig is that more than 40% of this mammoth has been uncovered, and they have even uncovered some mammoth hairs on which they are performing DNA studies, and this could be a very first of this kind of research. So Mark will tell us more about that as he presents, but it's very, very, very exciting. Mark is also the third of 4 generations of his family being born and raised in Sunnyvale, so he knows a lot about our local history. So sit back and really relax and be prepared for a dynamite presentation. It'll be followed by a Q&A session and also our drawing. So don't leave early, and if you do, you might miss out. So I'd like to present Professor Mark Hylkema.
Thank you. It's always fun to be at a lecture that's actually for once close to home. I just go back after this, put my feet up. It's great. Hey, it's really nice to be here again. Thanks for the enthusiastic response. It's the energy that comes from people like you that make it fun for me to do this. So I thought I'd take a different course this time. Last time we talked about the native people of the San Francisco, Monterey Bay area. And for those of you who have long memories and remember what I was saying then, you'll recall that I pointed out that the Bay Area here was one of the great population centers of tribal North America. Few of us realize that now because we've covered so much of that time and world up with our modern society. But I'd like to remind us all that this was an epicenter of native tradition. Many villages, many people, many monumental works that have since been removed, huge mounds that used to dot the bay shore all the way around San Francisco Bay, all of those have disappeared. And so we don't have a voice for that time, except through archaeology and the voices of the descendants who are still here. I also work with many other Native American people throughout the United States, and as most of you realize, there are many different tribal cultures. It's not one people, one culture, it's many cultures. And when you start looking at the variety of people in North America, think of the Navajo, the Sioux, the Cherokee, the Iroquois, the Calusa, the Northwest Coast people, it goes on, the Eskimo to the north. There's quite a diversity, but let's take it a step further. Look at Mesoamerica, where you have state-level societies, empires, with kings and literature, taxes and armies. And you go further down to South America, and you have the Inca Empire, and all the other empires that create the fabric of society there, literate peoples, and across the Andes, tribal band-level societies that are still in the jungles of the Amazon today. Many different peoples of the Americas. Where did they come from? Who were the first peoples? And that's the topic of my conversation. And the segue is kind of interesting for me because it took place over this mammoth that I had no real business excavating, actually. That is the purvey of paleontology. I'm an archaeologist, but since most of the public doesn't know the difference either, I thought I'd wear both hats. In this particular project, I'm going to tell you a story, because it's a story that took me on a very interesting path, a path of discovery. Because, of course, while I handle archaeological resources that are quite old, this is older yet. And it's not part of my normal experience as an archaeologist to look for a period of time we collectively call the Paleo-Indian times from the ancient past. So when I got involved with this mammoth discovery in, of all places, Castroville, it took me on a path. I started accumulating through cosmic vibrations, who knows what. All these specialists started coming out of the woodworks who all wanted to help us with our project. And it just started building on itself. This is one of those projects that you couldn't plan if you wanted to. And it's still unfolding even now. We're still working on aspects of it. So I wanted to share with you this journey I went on, because my bent is archaeology. When I got involved with this, well, animal, I was looking for the intersection between people and animal. Because we now know, and we didn't know so long ago, that Native Americans come to the Americas a long, long time ago. Back in the Ice Age, when you think of the Ice Age, a lot of us think of the cartoon movie, the Ice Age, with the squirrel and the acorn running around. I don't know, it may have been like that, I wasn't there. But, as an archaeologist, we have to work with the things we find. And so I started learning about the Pleistocene, the Great Ice Age, the first arrivals of peoples in the Americas, and went on this really wild journey. And so I wanted to share that with you tonight. So when I was asked for a topic, I have many. This was the one I came up with because I thought it has a lot of public appeal. Everybody loves mammoths. And that was the first thing I learned, which I didn't know, is everybody does. I have gotten more support over this unfunded mammoth project than I've ever had in 35 years of prehistory in archaeology. So clearly, there is an attraction to this. So I'm going to walk you through this. So I have two parallel stories. One is the story of the mammoth and how it came to be in this discovery. And the other is, it was what was on the menu for the first people. So I'm going to talk about first peoples. Because in my profession of archaeology, we get our specialties, and there's avenues of research we kind of put aside because they can drag you into other corners of knowledge that, you know, you can lose yourself. And so I really didn't get into Paleo-Indian culture. You'd think we would as archaeologists, you know, the beginnings, right? But it's a very contentious field of specialists that have very strong egos. And, you know, I've seen these guys go at it at these, you know, meetings and, you know, with their differences of opinions. And I thought, I'm not going there. Well, apparently I am. I'm in the thick of it. So with that, I'll start my slideshow. We'll go for about 50 minutes as I roll through this. Buckle up, we're going fast. And then we'll do the drawing and have some question and answer. So hopefully you can keep awake through it. I know how it is with my students. When I show a movie, it's longer than a half hour. You know. Meanwhile, they're on their text, you know, other machines. It's clearly, you know, anyway, it's all right. You can relax. So I didn't know what to coin this conversation starting this, so I did something edgy. Encounter with an Ice Age, you know, landscape. I thought that sounded edgy, so let's see if it's true. Okay. So it starts here when the Jefferson family was grading their artichoke fields, and probably without permit. We didn't want to talk about that part of it. And what they're doing is they have a hillside in Castroville that they grow, you know, acres and acres of artichokes and other crops on, and they wanted to take this hillside down, make a steep escarpment, take that fertile topsoil, that black soil you see on the top, and spread it out down below to make more arable land off of this hillside. So they're truncating this hill. And as they were carving this hill out with these delicate archaeological tools, they stopped and said, "What's that?" And in the ground was this big white object, clearly bone, and these farmers got off their, you know, this is a pretty big machine, you know, looked down and said, "I think that's a tusk." And you know what? It was. And when you see it, you'll go, what else could it be, really? But it speaks to the fact that farmers and ranchers oftentimes have archaeological resources and fabulous things on their properties, but they're oftentimes afraid to tell anybody because there's a fear that we're going to somehow interfere with their operations and so forth. You know, it's rarely the case, but that's the general feeling. And so when this farmer stopped and started making notifications about what he had found, all the other farmers around him were kind of angry about it. They didn't want anybody to know, right? So this is how we had to break through this kind of barrier too. Well, the Jefferson family that farms this property actually rents the land from a family called the Lyons family. The Lyons family has been in Castroville since the gold rush. And one of the daughters of the Lyons family is a state park ranger. I worked for state parks. And that's how I found out about the mammoth, through happenstance. So the question was, what can we do? What should we do? Will you come and look at this? Well, okay, I'll take a look at it, whatever. You know, people are always saying they find something. You know, is it real or not? So I finally made time to go and met the farmers, and we went to see what he had. Okay, now Castroville, as many of you know, is on the way to Monterey, out there in the middle of these fields. Castroville is not famous for very many things. One is artichokes, right? Number two, Norma Jean was nominated the Artichoke Queen here sometime in the past. You know, you know who Norma Jean was, right? Yeah. Marilyn Monroe. So, who would have thought, right? All in the Castroville. So, anyway, so there we were in Castroville, but I usually pass through this place pretty fast on the freeway. And so this is what we saw. He had graded this land out, stopped where he found what he thought was a tusk, and there were bones scattered all over this graded slope. So clearly he had not done the mammoth well. And he hit it with one of those graders. There were a lot of pieces. And that's unfortunate, but you know, he found this mammoth buried 12 feet below the existing slope. How would you know, right? So, anyway, that's the view I saw. Oh boy, yeah, it's not very pretty, but you can clearly see this is a tusk. You're looking at tiles of ivory from the tusk embedded in this nasty clay matrix. As I was soon to discover, this was the most difficult clay I've ever excavated in 35 years of archaeology. And it got worse, as I will say in a little bit. So we were looking at this going, well, that's a mammoth tusk, all right. So I started talking about woolly mammoths. So the farmer had yanked a tooth out of the ground, which was also the other smoking gun, you know, big mammoth tooth. It's pretty distinctive. And so there's these bits of bones scattered everywhere. Look, this is probably what a dentist sees in your mouth after they pull it to this big gaping aperture, right? Anyhow, so this is what we were looking at, trying to make sense of this find. So we kept talking about woolly mammoths. There's a slide of the tooth that came out. The farmer brought it back, a better picture. And a couple of things came out of this. One is we realized we had a pretty mature individual because the dentition, the enamel's worn right down to the bone. So this is an elderly individual. And so we knew that much. And we started asking around about and looking at the features because the teeth patterns are distinctive to the species. And so we immediately corrected right away, this is not a woolly mammoth. I didn't know, right? No, this is a Columbian mammoth. I never knew there were Columbian mammoths. Okay, so now I do. There's Columbian mammoths. They were here before the woolies. The woolies come later during the Ice Age, one of the later Ice Age migrations, but the Columbian mammoth has already been here for a couple million years. Who knew, right? So there we are finding out, no, not woolly mammoth, it's a Columbian mammoth. So then I started using the word elephant. Not good. Paleontologists, they don't call them elephants. Oh no, they're proboscideans. Okay, because of the big nose. So, okay, correction number 2, and very fast. And so this is what we were looking at, a Columbian mammoth, as artists imagine them. This is what you'd expect in Africa, yes? And here we have it here in our neighborhood. This mammoth stands 4 meters high at the shoulder. That's about 12 feet. And that's a big animal. It's a big animal. And so this is sort of the image we have of this creature. And we know from other archaeological finds that he was on the menu for first people. And it begs the question, how'd they bag this thing? You know? And that's going to be a big part of my talk, because there's some information on that. And then the other question that comes up is, why would they bag this thing? You know, there's a lot of rabbits out there. There are deer, if you want to go for bigger game. You know, why would you go for that? Because it's a high-risk hunting effort. These animals, you know, if you get hurt hunting game like this, it'll kill you. You know, sepsis, infection, broken bones. That was the way of life for early hunting, gathering people. So why would you go for a high-risk product like this? Well, clearly the meat payoff. One successful hunt will support a family for well, until the meat goes off. You know, it can be a very useful package of protein, as well as the bones that can be used for tools and so forth. Obviously there's a high payoff because they did focus on them. And there are a lot of sites that show that. So I'm learning this, but I still wonder, why would anybody want to hunt this thing? And I'll tell you right now, we don't know yet. But clearly they were on the menu big time, because they all disappear pretty soon after the arrival of people. So the correlation, the temptation is to correlate the arrival of people to the extinction of these animals. And that may not be true either, as we'll talk about. It's not like hunting, gathering people to exterminate their food source. They know better than that. They know how to manage resources, not overexploit. So it doesn't make sense. And as I'm going to go through this talk, there are a lot of puzzles. And that's part of my journey that I'm taking you on. You too can share the puzzle with me. All right? So anyway, that's what our creature ostensibly looked like. And so we began to look for our paleontologists to help us out. And none of the paleontologists I knew wanted to play. Because all the guys I know are busy working on big lizards. You know, Tyrannosaurus rex, oh, that's kind of cool. They go to Mongolia, look for clutches of dinosaur eggs. Mammoths, well, just didn't have the glory that they're looking for. So we thought, oh, what the heck, we can do this. We're archaeologists. We can do anything. So we decided we would approach this animal as an archaeological site and excavate it accordingly. So we used our own methodology for that, and it's different than paleontologists use. So clearly we had this role change going for us. By the way, Indiana Jones makes a pretty bad archaeologist. I mean, he ruins the temple. There's no field notes. He's taken the golden idol, and the Indians are saying they want it back. So, you know, at any rate, everybody knows who he is. So I started pulling together this team, and this is half of the story. It's hilarious. So I got involved. I became the default project director. And my buddy from Foothill College, Dan Curley, is a great archaeologist I work with quite a bit, and teacher there. All right, we can get students involved. He's got the screens and equipment. Start make it a student opportunity in the field, because I'm really big on education. All right, so meanwhile, we hear from the farmer, he has a friend who has a friend who knows this guy who's a PhD from Berkeley, named Dr. Timothy King. And his sister, Dr. Tim King's sister, runs a goat farm near Castroville, where they make these Epicurean goat cheeses. So we thought, okay, he's in. But what's hilarious about Tim King, he calls himself an archaeologist, and he has since become a dear friend. I had never met him before, but he's an epigrapher. You know what epigraphers are? They study literature. He translates Mayan glyphs. So, you know. Oh yeah, it'll fit right in. So it turned out it was a great move. He had no field experience at all, but he too fell in love with the project and started being one of the great characters of my life. And he's hilarious. So he too realized we need paleontologists to validate our credentials here. And so he started calling the Page Museum in LA, La Brea Tar Pits, and said, "We've got a mammoth," and they said, "Big deal." We've got a few over here as well, you know. And I'll tell you what, since we've made an alliance, we went to La Brea and size sort our bones with theirs. And what a great place. You know, you guys come in as tourists and you look through the glass, that's cool. We were on the other side of it. Oh boy, that was fun. So anyway, so we call up the Page, they say, yeah, we'll come on out. So I'm out there with the farmer in this muddy field, and one day we see this lacquered black Hummer with chrome wheels come spinning through the fields with mud shooting up in the air. There's this thing spinning around, and the farmer's looking like this. And I'm going, must be the LA boys. Sure enough, out of this car, the door opens and comes this stocky guy, Trevor Valley, with purple hair. And he's got, labrettes in his ears, and he's covered from head to foot with tattoos of fossils. So I go, he's in. So we finally got legitimacy through Trevor Valley, So I have to jump ahead here because Tim King and he made the most unusual pair. And as recently as a year and a half ago, they went on a National Geographic expedition to Siberia after this mammoth, because we all fell in love with it. They put out a documentary, it just came out a couple months ago, maybe you saw it on TV, on the mammoths. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That was them. And it's crazy because the story, that's another lecture. Anyhow, I mean, Tim gets a Russian half-track. It's all rusted in this Siberian junkyard. Puts it together, and off they go. You got to see that show. But anyway, that's him, Dr. Tim King. After a while, the farmer who was taciturn about our work started really enjoying it. They all come around eventually, And not only that, but all the other farmers started showing up with boxes of strawberries and artichokes as gifts because their kids wanted to see the mammoth. So all of a sudden, it was good. So we talked to the farmer, Mark Jefferson, and said, you should change your box label, ha ha ha, to mammoth artichokes. He did. I actually saw them at Whole Foods one day, stacked up. And he's got sizes on the side. Small, medium, large. And so, this thing is getting, you can't plan this stuff. So then the farmer fell so in love with the project, he was worried somebody's going to loot the site. Well, that's always a big problem with archaeology. So he put up a fence. So we went from, distance to, putting up a fence. Right next door was this huge, massive recycling plant. Big cranes, chunks of metal being dropped around, old trucks being crunched up, dust, guys with hard hats and American tattoos all over the place and their t-shirts, burly workers, and we're thinking, oh no, they're going to see us working here, and oh, they're going to loot our site. And, oh no, it turned out they knew the farmer. They were pals. Next thing you know, they're lifting over the top of the fence with a crane, a huge crane. They drop down this big metal box for us to use as an office. So now everybody's in on the mammoth. So our concern was with the media, of course, because the farmer didn't want the media to find out, because then people started coming on the property, he has issues, so we kept mum about it, and of course the media found out. So we had to fend off quite a bit of that for a while. But as we started mobilizing our team and equipment, it takes a lot of work, the logistics of this, we started hitting the rain. And it rained, and it rained. Everyone used to rain, right? Well, it rained every freaking weekend that we scheduled our digs. So after a while, we had to go out in the rain. This doesn't look so bad to you, but I'll tell you what, this is the gummiest, cementy clay I've ever encountered. So that became a logistical nightmare for us in the field. It got to the point where I would tell students they had to park a mile away to hike in with all their equipment, bring 2 sets of boots, one for the dirt clods. When you get there, take off your boots, and when you get to the dig, put on nicer shoes so you don't have these big clumps of dirt mixing in our nice excavation pits, right? Do you think students remember that? No! So we had them digging barefoot in the mud. It was great. So we started to reflect. What was it we were finding? What did it mean? And so I began to try and get educated about the Pleistocene and First Peoples. And it wasn't so difficult because there's a lot of literature out there. So it's hard for us to imagine now that at one time San Francisco Bay, where we sit in this valley, looked like this. And it looked like this because 14,000 years ago, when we think first people arrived, there was no bay. Because during the Ice Age, much of the world's fresh water is locked up in glaciers that are a couple of miles high, covering much of the northern hemisphere, locking up immense amounts of water such that the world sea level was 300 feet lower than it is now. That means San Francisco Bay didn't exist. The Farallon Islands were connected to the mainland. The sea was 3 miles away from where it is now. That landscape has since disappeared, as I will explain. So finding Paleo-Indians, first people, is a difficult prospect because of the environmental change that has transpired. It's been cataclysmic. So with that in mind, we reckon elevation from sea level. So if sea level is 300 feet, stands to reason where you sit was 300 feet higher then. So the ecology is different, the landscape is different, but this was on the menu when first people get here. Mammoths, mastodon, there was a type of bison called bison antiguus. We also had buffaloes still then. All the animals we have now were here then as well, but these are the ones that dropped out. Bison antiguus was much larger than the American bison. We also had horses. Horses are an American invention. They migrate the other way into Siberia. The moose comes from China over to here. Things are moving back and forth. How can they move? Well, it's because Alaska and Siberia were connected for many thousands of years as a solid land mass. And that's what facilitated the movement of people and animals both ways. It's not a one-way street. So this was what was on the menu. Horses, North American invention, they become extinct here and prosper in the old world to be reintroduced